All right. Well, it looks like that people are coming in out of the waiting room. So we'll get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Laura Huffman. I'm the CEO of the Austin Chamber of Commerce. And welcome to our Pulse on Politics. This is the SD14 Candidate Forum. We appreciate you taking time today to join us in this forum. We certainly miss seeing you in person, but we here at the Chamber are going to continue to do everything we can to provide you with timely information and resources so that you can make informed decisions and participate in all that's going on in our community. Just as a reminder, as we open up for businesses, please remember that while we're all different, there is an us in Austin. We just launched this campaign earlier this week. And the message that we have is that a mask on each of us is a win for all of us. So please, please remember to wear a mask in public to protect yourself and your neighbors. Now it is truly my pleasure to introduce today's moderator. Tamara Fields is the Office Managing Director for Accenture in Austin. She's responsible for bringing innovation to clients, recruiting and retaining top talent, and strengthening Accenture's impact in the Austin community. She is, like myself, an Austin native and a University of Texas graduate. Tamara was named the Texas Exes Black Alumni Network's 2019 Legacy Alumnus of the Year and is the winner of the Austin Business Journal's 2019 Profiles in Power. Tamara also serves on the Chamber of Commerce's Executive Committee as the Vice Chair of State and Local Advocacy. Tamara is also a recipient of the Austin Chamber of Commerce's Greater Austin Business Award for Executive Leadership. So welcome to all of the candidates and welcome Tamara, and thank you for being today's moderator.
Thank you so much. I just want to say a thanks to the Austin Chamber of Commerce because I really appreciate all of the sessions that they constantly do in our community to make sure that we're advocating and sharing information. So I want to give a special thanks to the Chamber and a special thanks to all of our elected officials today, our to-be elected officials today for sharing their point of view. First, for the candidates who are on the line, you will be given 1 minute to provide your opening comments about your qualifications and candidacy. Each candidate should explain why they're running and why they are a better candidate in the race. Again, this is being hosted. We have a webinar host who's going to change the video to yellow card to provide candidates with second notice remaining in their allotted time. And then the Zoom webinar host will also change to a red card when the candidate's time has expired. So remember again, it will be important to manage against the colors that are provided. If a candidate goes beyond the allotted time, we will eventually be interrupted by myself and muted. So we do ask that each of the candidates strictly adhere to the allotted time. The order of the candidates the order in which the candidates speak will be determined at random and will rotate with each question that we have today. After each candidate provides the opening comments, I will ask a predetermined question, and each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to that question. Again, 1 minute to respond to that question. At the conclusion of our 6 predetermined questions, the candidates will be given 1 minute for closing remarks. So again, we want to thank everyone for their attendance today, and we're excited about today's session. We're going to start with the candidate introductions, and we're going to start with Wallace Thomas Burns II, who's going to start again. Don't forget, Waller, you have 1 minute and you are good to go.
Yes, Walter Thomas Burns II. I see on the screen no picture of me. I didn't send one in. I didn't realize it was necessary. Anyway, a little bit about myself. I'm a 4th generation Texan, born in 1939. That makes me 81 years of age. I've combined jobs and business partners. My first job out of law school. I graduated in 1967 from Texas Law School. I went to University of the South Swanee, Tennessee for college, and St. John's School in Houston for high school. My first job was Assistant United States Attorney in Houston. I resigned and then went to Kenya to start a tourist business with a friend of mine. We had a ranch and a small inn on an island in the Indian Ocean. Then after that, we sold that. I was assistant director of admissions at Rice University. And then I owned with partners t-shirt company in Houston. And one of our clients was Bloomingdale's at Christmas time, which was a very nice deal.
Thank you, Waller. I appreciate that. Because we're at the 1 minute mark, I'm going to have to move to our next candidate, Pat Dixon. Pat, we need to unmute you there for a second, and then let's give it a second and we'll restart.
Very good. Are we good to go?
I think we're good now.
Fantastic. Thank you. My website is logic14.org. 14 because that's the district I'm running for, and logic because that's one word for common sense, which is 2 words, and that's my platform. When you go to my website, you're not going to see plans, priorities, and platform. You're going to see my record during 2 terms on city council. When I come to the Senate, it's not about me knowing all the answers. It's about me listening, deliberating, and using common sense. I noticed through your priorities, you talk about diversity. Diversity is important. The Texas legislature is composed entirely of Democrats and Republicans. Jeff and I are neither. Out of 31 senators, shouldn't we have at least 1 libertarian? Vote for diversity. I'm Pat Dixon. I'm the logical choice. Go to my website, logic14.org.
I appreciate that, Pat, and thanks for keeping to the 1 minute. Next, we're going to go to Sarah Eckhart.
Can y'all hear me?
We can. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much. I'm Sarah Eckhart, and I am very proud to have represented Travis County as your Travis County judge. And I'm super proud of Central Texas for really setting the bar for collaborative leadership. We're not seeing a whole lot of that at the state level. We're living in a very, very divisive time, a time where division, confusion, and blame has become the order of the day. And even though we fight hard in Central Texas, I hope that I've developed a reputation for fighting fair. And sitting down at the table, doing the homework, facing the facts, and getting us to solution. I like to address big problems and build the coalitions necessary to push those problems through. COVID-19 is a prime example of that. And thank you so much to the Chamber of Commerce for the us in Austin. We've got a big challenge ahead of us, and we need all hands on deck. This is not the time to weaponize COVID-19 or any of the other big challenges that face us. So thank you for your partnership. I look forward to taking that partnership to the Senate.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that very much. Jeff Ridgeway, you are next.
Yes, hi. Thank you for having me. My name is Jeff Ridgeway. I'm a physician here in Austin and have been here for 15 years practicing medicine in women's health. I've dealt with patients of all walks of life. It was not uncommon for us to have homeless patients and celebrities in the waiting room at the same time. And so I've dealt with a lot of different high-risk pregnancy conditions that needed help during that time. I'm the only independent candidate running in this race. I'm not allied with any major political party, and I'm not taking any donations from any political party. I think at this point in our history, we need someone with medical knowledge to be in the Senate position at the state level in order to help guide us through this crisis. And we also need someone who's not going to be beholden to any party agendas in guiding us through this. So thank you for your consideration, and thank you to the Chamber of Commerce for setting up this forum. I'm excited to get to it.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. Eddie Rodriguez.
All right, can you all hear me?
We can. Thank you, Eddie.
Thank you. I'm running for the Texas Senate because I have the best experience, judgment, and vision to guide us through this current crisis that we're in and to lead us to the long and hopefully equitable recovery to come. So for the last 18 years, I've been fighting for working families. In my time in the Texas House, I passed legislation that provided 700,000 more kids with free breakfast by expanding the free breakfast program. I expanded dual credit to allow high school kids to graduate with up to 2 years of college under their belt, and passed Homestead Preservation District to meet affordable housing needs in central Austin. Next session will be a tough budget, probably the toughest in modern Texas history. Next session will be my 10th budget session. And following the budget, redistricting will be a big issue next session. Then the next session will be my 5th redistricting session. And I believe now, at this moment, we need proven progressive leaders who will get things done and who will fight for working families, criminal justice reform, and small businesses.
Thank you, Eddie. Our last candidate for today is Don Zimmerman.
Good afternoon, Tamara, and thank you. I am Don Zimmerman, 5th generation Texan from San Antonio. I have 2 mechanical engineering degrees from Texas A&M, and as you know, when you have 2 degrees from A&M, you're certifiably half as smart as the average Aggie. I've had a professional career in high-tech engineering. I currently work on laser scanning microscopy for a medical imaging company, and I have a wife, Jennifer. We'll be married 11 years next month, and we have a 4-year-old boy. And of course, I did serve on the Austin City Council, and prior to that, I was elected as president of my utility district, where I made quite a bit of news filing a successful lawsuit against the city of Austin for illegal taxation. So my main purpose in running is to demand that all government, especially local government, follow the rule of law, that they become more efficient, reduce tax rates, and basically treat constituents better.
Thank you, Don. I appreciate that very much. And I want to thank each of our Senate 14 candidates, District 14 candidates. We have 6 predetermined questions today. They will be asked at random. Each candidate will maintain 1 minute to answer. And as previously indicated, we will mute you and I will interrupt you to make sure that we get to all of the 6 questions. If you need me to repeat a question, please feel free to let me know and I'll be happy to do so. Our first question, economic development. The Austin Chamber has worked over the years to create good paying jobs in Central Texas. 2 main economic development tools that we have supported, including the Texas Enterprise Fund and the Texas Economic Development Act, Chapter 313 of the Tax Code. These and other policies have been used selectively and judiciously to ensure these jobs and investments come to Texas rather than other states. Do you support continuing the state's use of economic development policies such as the Texas Enterprise Fund and Chapter 313? We're going to start with candidate Pat Dixon.
You may not like my answer, but I support what's called free market sustainability. That means growth needs to pay for itself. I've seen studies when I was on city council that looked at the benefit of tax abatements and whether they create jobs. And I've seen a mixture of results. Some studies say, yes, they create jobs. Other studies say you're just moving jobs around. What those studies don't include is the impact of growth. When there's growth, who pays for more kids in school? Who pays for more cars on the road? Who pays for more demand on water, police, and everything else? I want to see those studies. But there's also an ethical part of this. I'm a small business owner. I don't have an abatement. If there's going to be an abatement, let's make it across the board.
I appreciate it. Our next candidate for your response, Sarah Eckhart.
The best economic development incentive is to have good government that provides a level playing field for all enterprises, irrespective of what industry that they're in and who they know at the legislature. So it's important for us to have good schools, good healthcare, good transportation for people, for goods, for services, and also for ideas. Government needs to do what government does well. Government does not put its thumb on the scale of a specific enterprise well. So generally speaking, and I think you all know this about me, I do my homework and I've done considerable research in the area of where economic development incentives do work. They do work, but only in very selective circumstances, and they only work when they're performance-based. And that's the reason why I, along with the Commissioner's Court, completely overhauled our economic development policy to make sure it was performance-based, effective, efficient, and fair. We very rarely offer preferential tax treatment. I will be the same at the Texas legislature. I want to be frank with you about that.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Our next candidate's response, Jeff Ridgeway.
Yes, hi. I agree with Judge Eckhart on some of those issues. I think that these tax codes do benefit businesses in some select cases. The thing is, I actually think we're in one of those cases now. Across the country, we have cities and municipalities that are reeling from the effects of the protests and vagaries in the rule of law that are going on. And we have to look out for Texas. We've got a stable state overall here, and we can attract some of those businesses fairly, I wouldn't say easily, but by using some of these tax incentives. So I think this is one of those times where we need to definitely look at using some of these funds for that purpose. In general, in the long run, I don't know that that would necessarily be something that we want to continue, but I think right now is an opportunity and we need to look at taking advantage of it.
Thank you, Jeff. Eddie Rodriguez.
Yes, I do support the Enterprise Fund, Texas Development, Economic Development Act 313, which I was on the Ways and Means Committee to reauthorize that, and 312, which will be up for reauthorization next session. If they're done right, I do support them. And by done right, I mean that workers get they're good paying jobs, that the benefits are there for the workers. That's the most important thing. Right now, particularly in the moment that we're in, we do need jobs. A lot of people are out of work. I'm getting a lot of calls from folks, and we need to try to help them the best way we can. So I do support that. I will support the reauthorization of 312 agreements next session. But I think we do need to, at the state level, and I intend to work on that as well, to make sure that the hiring practices are diverse and that they're trying to work with our local school districts to get kids the ability to get good paying jobs as they leave high school if they choose not to go to college.
Thank you. Don Zimmerman, you're next. Don, are you there?
Yes, are you there? Can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Okay, yeah, I was saying that I would support abolishing these subsidies for a number of reasons. One is the performance metrics that were just mentioned end up becoming very complicated, and those performance metrics are controlled by the same government bureaucrats who were in favor of the subsidies in the first place, so I don't think they're fair and accurate. I also don't think the subsidies are legal, because what they do is they shift the tax burden onto existing businesses that are already overtaxed. It should not be legal to force existing businesses to pay additional taxes to subsidize new businesses. And moreover, I don't trust government bureaucrats to be smarter than the market. The market knows what businesses need to come. What we should do is decrease taxes for everyone so that more business comes into a level playing field.
Thank you. Our last candidate, Waller, Thomas Burns.
Yes, there's a lot of news lately about Tesla moving here to Austin, and the Del Valley School District has allowed a $68 million situation. There's some rules and regulations with respect to that. I'm against that if it raises the individual property taxes for citizens of Austin. There's a rebate clause in there that 14 some odd million will be given back to the school district. In essence, after a 10-year period, Tesla is to pay only $7 million in property taxes. I hope that that is looked at because jobs are necessary. However, that kind of abatement is very detrimental to the 28,000 people who live in the Del Valley district.
Thank you. We're going to move now to transportation. Recognize that you have 1 minute, and the order of the candidate's response is random. Because of COVID-19 related impacts, the state's traditional sources of transportation revenues might be significantly lower than what was estimated in January of 2020. Do you support the use of comprehensive development agreements and public-private partnerships to develop, manage, or toll lanes to help ease congestion on roads across the state and allow the private sector to offset public construction costs? Our first candidate for response is Judge Sarah Eckhart.
Absolutely. I have long history in this area, and I will tell you frankly, I was not in favor of toll financing for major transportation projects when I first came into office, because at that time I thought that certainly the Texas legislature would increase and index the gas tax or replace it with some other appropriate ongoing and robust revenue source. That has not occurred. And I don't see the political winds changing sufficiently quickly to address our needs. So yes, I absolutely favor CDAs and public-private partnerships, as well as looking at toll financing in the area of congestion price tolling so that we can pay for transit in our major corridors as well. The Round Rock Express bus coming down Mopac on the managed lane has been a wild success. And we should expect to see the same kind of success on 183 South as it comes online, as well as on the cap and stitch of I-35. This is a game changer for us. We must be able to move people, goods, services, and information in these transportation corridors. And the state has not yet cut it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Our next candidate, Jeff Ridgeway.
I definitely would be in favor of public-private partnerships in this area. Us here in Austin, we have seen so much money spent on transportation in the past few years without any appreciable change in the traffic that is going on Mopac or on I-35. We have an opportunity soon to look at the I-35 corridor and re-envision how that's going to look. I also think we have some opportunities to look at transportation out towards Bastrop, which has become a major issue for District 14 as well. In general, I don't think toll roads help that much. I know Judge Eckhart just mentioned the bus from Round Rock that uses the managed lane. As far as I can tell, that lane is not appreciably changing traffic whatsoever. So I don't know that toll roads are going to be the answer here, but I do think some form of public-private partnership will be able to get us through this in terms of redeveloping our transportation infrastructure.
Thank you, Jeff. Our next candidate, Eddie Rodriguez.
Thank you. Yeah, I believe in all of the above approach. We do need mass transit. I've supported mass transit in the past, worked with Senator Watson on that. We need to continue doing that. I support Project Connect and the I-35 Capital Express Central project. I do support public-private partnerships. Our private sector needs to pitch in. They need to be part of the solution. I believe that's fair to the taxpayer. And I do believe in comprehensive development agreements. I will admit to you that at one point earlier in my career, I was very anti-toll road, and I've changed my position on that as that being one of the tools in the toolbox that we need to try to fight congestion. Ultimately, the answer to fighting the congestion that we are starting to see again in Austin is more mass transit. And I think my focus would be on mass transit.
I appreciate that. Next candidate, Don Zimmerman.
Yes, first thing I want to say is I am adamantly opposed to the Project Connect $10 billion mass transit. From a technical view, as an engineer who's worked in complex systems engineering for many decades, mass transit is a 19th century outdated mode of transportation, and we should not be spending money on it. When it comes to the public-private partnerships of toll roads, these things can be very complex, and I have concerns about private companies being able to use public or state condemnation power over other people's property. So these agreements can be very, very complicated. It's impossible to answer this fairly in 1 minute. I'm generally opposed to these things, but it would depend on the situation in particular. We definitely need more transportation technology upgrades. We need more highways and more roads, and we need to get ready for the new technology of driverless cars.
I appreciate that. Waller Burns.
Yes, I-35, I think, goes from Mexico to Canada. How many people from out of state are using I-35? There's no way to say, all right, if you live in Austin, then we'll have a special toll road. You wouldn't have a clue who could use it, but I'm in favor of toll roads, especially when you drive along I-35 and you're parked, well, not parked, but indeed, the congestion is incredible. Toll roads are very necessary, and hopefully they would be enlarged the number of them So mass transit, light rail, is very important to pick and choose. Austin has many unused light rail ability, and to check them for safety and indeed open, again, like the trolley system years ago, is more light rail capability. Thank you.
Thank you. Pat Dixon.
The direct answer to your question is maybe, but the more comprehensive answer is Mobility First by Moore and Staley and Romance of the Rail by Randall O'Toole. They say more than I can in 1 minute. But ultimately, what we're talking about is funding. And when Cato does a study, you may not be able to see this, but in 2018, they said 55% of the Texas fuel tax is being diverted to non-transportation usage. I want transparency. When people pay for transportation, it should go to transportation. When people pay for schools, it should go to schools. Let's not play shell games.
All right, thank you. I appreciate everyone adhering to the 1 minute rule. Our next topic area is school finance. In the 86th session, the legislature passed and Governor Abbott signed into law a massive overhaul of the Texas school finance system via House Bill 3. This legislation created incentives for school districts to ensure a greater share of their students graduated college, career, or military ready. However, Austin ISD alone will send over $600 million in local property taxpayer dollars back to the state in recapture. How will you work to reduce the impact of recapture on local taxpayers and ensure our schools are well-resourced? Our first candidate for response is Jeff Ridgeway.
Yes, thank you. This is an area of great emphasis of mine. I feel that I feel any Texan who learns about the recapture laws, especially if they live in the Austin area, is nothing less than furious about them. The last legislature did a lot to try and reform this system. I feel like there's a lot more to do and that we need to really band together in Austin because this should be an issue that crosses all party lines and all parts of the city. I'm very much in favor of school choice as well. In fact, I might be on the extreme end of that. I feel like a parent should, as a parent myself of an 11-year-old, I feel that parents are the ones that are able to guide their children's education better than anybody. And they should be able to choose whatever school that they can get to within the city limits or even crossing county lines that would be best for their child. So I'd like to see our magnet system develop more and more options for school choice.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Jeff. Our next candidate is Eddie Rodriguez.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the direct answer to the question is that we need a formula change. If you're looking at AISD and others that are in similar situations, although there aren't very many other districts that are in similar situations than AISD, but we need to look at changing the formulas to reflect more the reality on the ground. Austin has high property values, but there are a lot of low-income children that are going to our public schools. So I think in the formula, for as an example, looking at how many kids qualify for free or reduced lunch should be taken into account. The socioeconomic level of the kids should be taken into account when we're looking at the formulas, simply because it's more challenging to educate low-income children. It's just a fact. It's proven out. So I think that I would look at those kind of changes to the formula. The last thing I'll say on House Bill 3, the problem with House Bill 3, and though I was proud to voted for it and support it, is it was a one-time deal. We needed to make these change the system so that the state can continue providing more money for our public schools.
Thank you, Eddie. Don Zimmerman. Don, we got to get you off mute there.
The Robin Hood or the recapture, I have to mention, is a partisan issue because the ideology behind this is really the socialist redistribution of wealth. It was a terrible idea. And when the partisan Democrats locally discovered they were on the losing end of socialist wealth redistribution, they complain about it and call it unfair. The bottom line with school finance is we're not going to get better education for our tax dollars unless we have school choice. We desperately need school choice. Trying to satisfy the greed of the monopoly government school system with more tax revenue is like trying to satisfy the Bastrop wildfire by giving it more trees. We have got to have school choice. and have parents and teachers decide on the education of their kids with their money.
All right, thank you, Don. I appreciate that. Wyler Burns?
The one area, I think, sales tax. I don't know how much of the sales tax is being used to fund education. I do know that the property tax laws for individuals in Travis County, in Austin especially, is extraordinarily high. Many people cannot afford the property taxes. They're selling their homes to avoid those taxes. I'm in favor of going to any school that you can get to with some sort of public transportation and go to that school. Why be limited where you live to go to a particular school? It might be easier to get to it, but there should be a choice to go anywhere you wish to go, depending on, number one, investigating by the parents who the teachers are and what the education is in that school district. Thank you.
Thank you. Pat Dixon?
I challenge the premise of using the metric of per pupil spending. The metric I care about is getting the best results for the best price. That's what I want. The budget's going to be tight. There are ways we can improve education without digging into the budget. And one of the ways I think we need to look at is getting teachers away from having to teach to mandated tests. If we want to attract and retain the best teachers, let them use their passion and talents. The other thing I think we want to do is create as much inspiration in the classroom for the teachers and students. You need to look at the TED Talk from Sir Ken Robinson.
Thank you, Pat. I appreciate it. Judge Eckhart?
I really appreciate Pat's comments there. We have got to empower our teachers to inspire rather than to fill in bubbles. That's extremely important. I am a great believer in the public education system, and I am coming out of my chair because I see this so often in government that we starve it, then we blame it, then we kick it to the curb in order for a private solution to come in that will be inferior and create greater disparity. And we cannot allow that to happen with the greatest and most successful experiment in leveling the playing field that humankind has ever created, which is the public education system. So what I would say is, instead of plugging the hole with a one-time Band-Aid of rainy day money, instead we need to roll up our sleeves and make the hard decisions about how we fund education at the state level. Our property taxes are high at the local level because the state has not made the hard decisions about ongoing revenue sources at the state level. Gas taxes down because car efficiency is up. Oil and gas revenues are, sorry, you know where I'm going here.
I do, and I appreciate that very much. All right, so as we continue down on our questions, why don't we move down to the area of budget? In his latest update, the Texas Comptroller Glenn Hagar announced state sales tax revenue totaled $2.61 billion in May. That was 13.2% less than May of 2019, and the steepest year-over-year decline since January of 2010. We expect the Comptroller's revenue estimate in July, which will be a preview of how much money the legislator will have to prepare for our next budget. Most of us assume that cuts will have to be made to the budget. Where would you cut the budget and why? Our first candidate for response is Eddie Rodriguez.
Thank you. I think there's a lot of moving parts to that question. We don't know if the federal government will provide some more revenue for us to help fill some of these gaps, and so there's a lot of unknowns. But I will say that first thing that I would look at first is prioritizing what I don't want to cut, what we want to keep funding it to the level that we can. That being public education and healthcare. Those are the two main ones that I would prioritize. I think there's some smaller things you can do, like postponing payments, let's say to the foundation school fund by a couple of weeks. That could save $2 billion. I don't believe that we should be spending about $1 billion on border security, which is what we're spending. That's the federal government's job. That's not our job. As well, I think we need to put charter schools on a timeout and not fund them. They're getting funded $1,000 per kid per day more than public schools, and that'll save $2 billion there as well. So I would look at things like that to cut. Sorry, I can't answer. We don't know what the budget's what's gonna come down from the feds, though, unfortunately.
I appreciate that. Don Zimmerman, you're next.
Yes, I think it's an excellent question, and it's going to be an issue. I would start with double-digit budget cut demands of all the bureaucracies and all the state agencies. Our local businesses, local property tax payers, we're all faced with these huge shortfalls thanks to the government shutting down the economy. So there are going to have to be huge cuts. You would have to start with across-the-board cuts, because if you don't, you end up in an endless fight of every government bureaucracy claiming the world is going to end unless they get the same or an increased budget. So I think this can be done. The problem is the government bureaucracies are built to feed themselves at the cost of everybody else. So this is a serious problem, and there's no way we can do justice to this in 1 minute.
No, I appreciate that, Don. Waller Burns.
Well, budgets are one thing that, of course, is absolutely important. Where is the money coming from to do something about the budget? Again, I stress strongly, it should not be anything to do with the property taxes for the individuals in the area. How in the world then can you get enough money? Well, one way is, if it's not broken, don't fix it. There are so many businesses moving to Austin and to Texas. The amount of them moving here is such that our no state income tax, number one. Otherwise, many people are moving here, especially from California, to start a business. And once those businesses get going, there ought to be some revenue that mainly, because they have been so successful, they would be more than happy to help pay for education, which I think probably is number one.
Thank you, Waller. I appreciate that. Pat Dixon.
Well, to begin with, you might not be surprised a libertarian wants smaller government. What might surprise you is I want to have a fiscally responsible budget, and that's what I did on city council as well as other nonprofit organizations. Now, I'll also say, Dawn, you and I know each other. We're friends, but I disagree with you. If you're saying across the board cuts, that's not the way you budget, because then you punish departments that need to have the funding. What you do is identify the functions that government should not be doing. For example, the agriculture department in Texas has 130 statutory duties, including going around the state and inspecting scales at barbecue restaurants. That's the way I want to look at the budget.
Thank you. Judge Sarah Eckhart.
First, if you demand that the state cut further into the bone of its core statutory deliverables like health, education, transportation, infrastructure, you will see your local property taxes increase, because the locals will continue to pick up the dime for those essential services. That's why your local property taxes are so high in great measure. So with regard to things that I would cut at the state level, first of all, I would divest from militarized policing and federalized immigration and border security, which is a federal issue, not a state issue, and we should get out of that. Next, I would phase out ineffective tax breaks for enterprises that don't need the assistance and don't feed a core deliverable of state government. There's lots of them. And also I would convert the local option homestead exemption from a 20% to a flat dollar figure. By doing it as a flat dollar figure, Richie Rich on his $1 million home would get the exact same dollar benefit from the homestead exemption as poor Paul in his $100,000 home. And I think that would certainly help.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Our last candidate, Jeff Ridgeway.
Yes, well, we need to face facts. This next legislature, the budget's going to be an absolute disaster, no matter what you cut and no matter what happens between now and then. I think in terms of cutting areas, there are some areas, you know, if I could mash all of y'all together, we'd have some pretty good ideas here. Mr. Zimmerman has some good ideas about cutting bureaucracy. I also agree with Mr. Dixon that it needs to be targeted to some extent. And there are some other areas that could be looked at along those lines. I am going to disagree with a couple of the other panelists. I work in healthcare. Believe me, there's some areas that can be cut from our healthcare budget that would not meaningfully impact the delivery of healthcare to some of our underserved citizens in the area. And so those would be my areas of emphasis.
I appreciate it. We're going to move a little bit in alignment to budget to the rainy day fund. To follow up on the question about the budget, Texas has one of the largest rainy day funds of any state in the country. It is expected to have $8.5 billion at the start of 2021. COVID-19 has certainly caused a rainy day in Texas, significant decline in sales tax revenue, unprecedented unemployment, and failing oil prices. If we don't have enough revenue to pay our bills, the question becomes, what will the use of the rainy day fund to pay for? For example, last session, the rainy day fund was used to pay for Hurricane Harvey expenses. In the 87th legislature, what would you use the rainy day fund to pay for and why? Our first candidate for response is Don Zimmerman.
This is an excellent question. I would say the rainy day fund should be used for some of the economic destruction that has happened owing to the Wuhan virus. I think that some kind of natural disaster. I think the pandemic qualifies as a natural disaster to some extent, but again, agreeing with my fiscal conservative friends, government is already too big at the state and local level. So I would look for these double-digit budget cuts. Of course, you can make adjustments depending on what you believe is more credible for your district and constituency, but we've got to have double-digit cuts, and then we could make up some of the remainder for essential services through minimal use of the rainy day fund. But again, it's a very complex question how that's going to work out.
I appreciate that. Our next candidate's response is Waller Burns.
What about days that it's not raining? I think that fund should be used, well, not in case of a urgent matter of hurricanes, etc. Open it up to other possibilities rather than rainy day, when sometimes that is not happening. And there are other avenues to use that money up front without it being a hurricane or a horrible tornado with respect to rainy days. Study that whole financial situation with rainy day. Maybe much of that money can be used in another way other than after the fact of something happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next candidate, Pat Dixon.
Every organization I've been associated with that manages a budget responsibly has a reserve, so that if revenue suddenly disappears like it is now, you can maintain operation for some period of time. That's what I think the rainy day fund should be for. Now, you might like that answer, but you might not like this answer, because I know you're asking for support of Prop 1. So continuing support of Prop 1. That was taking the rainy day fund and putting it into transportation. I don't agree with that policy. I think you use a reserve for its intended purpose. When I was on city council in Lago Vista, our reserve got too small. We had to grow it so that we can ensure we maintain operations. I think that's why you have a reserve.
I appreciate that, Pat. Can we move to Judge Sarah Eckhart?
Sure. The rainy day fund, just as Pat describes, it is an emergency reserve. We've had one at Travis County and have used it responsibly for years and kept it at an appropriate level, that we're not hoarding your tax dollars. We're keeping your money in your pocket and only keeping as much reserve as necessary to ferry us to the other side of a rainy day. It is not a replacement for ongoing revenue for our ongoing needs. So rainy day fund should be used predominantly for a government operational reserve in times of economic downturn. But then in this particular pandemic, we will also need to use it for one-time infrastructure that's going to be necessary for us to adapt to COVID-19 and move forward. We're also going to need it to ferry individuals and businesses to the other side of this pandemic through small business grants and also through training and supports for individuals who have been cast out of work because of COVID-19. In this instance, there is going to be all kinds of very appropriate use for rainy day fund. I would not use it to replace revenues.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Jeff Ridgeway.
Yes, thank you. Honestly, this is about the rainiest day most of us are going to see in our lifetimes in Texas. So I do think it's appropriate to go ahead and use the rainy day fund, the stability fund, for to help get us through these times. Some of what Judge Eckhart said, I agree with. I think that we can use this to help support our small and medium-sized business community, but particularly those that are based here in the Texas area. My focus would be on Austin and the surrounding areas particularly. I also think that some of that fund could be used to update our educational system to deal with the virus as it is currently. We're still unsure if our children are actually going to go back to school in the fall, and a lot of good school districts have managed to adapt to this, but they need some funds to help adapt further. And I think there's some opportunities there. I also think that there should be some role for liability protection for small businesses who go ahead and opened up during this pandemic so that they're not ruined by lawsuits as a result.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Last to Eddie Rodriguez.
Thank you. Yeah, the rainy day fund has been for much of its lifetime kind of a sacred cow for my Republican colleagues. It's less so now, and I think if there is a rainy day, we're in it, and we do need to tap that resource. I will say, though, I don't think we should use all of it, of course, but I think we do need to tap into that and really look at what this pandemic has revealed, which is that the inequities in our communities. So I would use it to, or some of it, to strengthen or tighten the social safety net that we have. Let's look at CHIP and SNAP benefits, how we can strengthen that. The Workforce Commission, make sure that they're able to provide the assistance in a more timely fashion. Small business loans would be another thing I would look into as well, because we need to get our businesses back going and get our economy back again.
I appreciate that. As we move into our last question before we move into summary statements, I wanted to ask each of you, if elected to the Texas State Senate, what is the first bill you would file and why? We're going to start with candidate Waller Burns.
The first bill I would consider talking about, I have run across this electronic world, and indeed a state law exists with respect, as all the candidates know, the individual income by the individuals running for the Texas Senate. What if a guy graduates from Harvard and he doesn't have the modern capabilities, but he finds out, hey, I'm going to run for the Texas Senate, but he cannot do so because of the law that is mandatory to file the income of the candidates electronically. That would be the first bill I would suggest.
I appreciate that, Waller. Our next candidate, Pat Dixon.
I'm really not setting priorities right now, so I'd like to defer, but I'm going to answer your question. And I'm an ambitious person, so if I had to file a bill right now, end the war on drugs.
All right, thank you. Judge Sarah Eckhart.
Absolutely. The very first thing I would do is file a bill to pull down Medicaid. We must have that federal Medicaid, those federal Medicaid dollars. Our numbers of uninsured have ballooned with an increase in unemployed folks who don't have health insurance and who are falling ill to COVID-19 or are taking care of other members of their household who've fallen ill. This is a a healthcare crisis wrapped in an economic crisis. So I think the biggest bang for that first piece of legislation would be pulling down Medicaid.
Thank you. Jeff Ridgeway.
I mentioned it already, but liability protection for our businesses based here in Texas. I want businesses to be able to reopen and start rehiring their employees without fear of being ruined by lawsuits. Some of the candidates have heard me mention this about the kind of lawyers that are crawling around Austin waiting to sue anybody and everybody. And I really think that there's a lot of businesses that are in fear of that right now and that need some protection in order to move forward.
Thank you. Eddie Rodriguez.
Thanks. That is an excellent question. Actually, it's a really good question. One of the things that I noticed first, there's a lot of issues that this pandemic has exposed us that we need to fix and address. But one of the things that I think keeps coming up, and I believe that we can have a lot of bipartisan support and urban-rural support on a bill that really provides for universal broadband. We know more than ever now that if you don't have access to the internet, you are at an extreme disadvantage in this state. You may not be able to see your doctor, and you may not be able to work from home if that's what your employer wants you to do. Schooling your kids at home, potentially, depending on what happens next semester. You're at a grave disadvantage, and I like the chances of passing something substantial because of that. You have rural broadband, that's an issue that they face in rural areas, and in this case, Bastrop County. And you have the digital divide that you face in urban areas like here in Austin. So I think it's a bipartisan bill that could really make a big difference in people's lives, and that's would probably be the first one I'd file. Thank
you. Last, Don Zimmerman.
Yes, great question. A lot of things we could do. I would start with banning taxpayer-funded lobbying, and I would also provide meaningful penalties for violations of that law. It's no secret now that the government is largely controlled by unelected government bureaucrats who never answer to the voters, and in fact, largely do not answer to the people that voters elect to office to take care of their best interests. I've had a lot of personal experience with this. The thing I would do right on the heels of that is something I call the bureaucrats breaking bad law. I've had numerous instances of local government employees deliberately violating the law because they know that they can't be fired by, say, an elected city council member. They don't respond to investigation properly. They really act like they're above the law. And the only way you can get a decision overturned by a bureaucrat violating the law is to take them to court. And that takes years and hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we need to get control of our government away from the bureaucracy.
I appreciate that. It's hard to believe that we've worked through all of our questions. And just as we did at the beginning of our session, we're going to give each candidate that's seeking election to our Senate 1 minute to make closing remarks. We're going to start with Don Zimmerman.
Well, thank you again for the Chamber of Commerce for putting this on. It's some technical complexity and a lot of trouble to do these forums. So thank you again for hosting us all. My Facebook page, Texans for Zimmerman, has more information about the campaign. I think it should be clear based on my 20 years of activism in the city of Austin, living in the same house, working very hard. I've been a Republican since the Barry Goldwater campaign in 1964. I'm a very hardcore fiscal conservative. I have a very deep technical background. I know how to do analytical problem solving. And for fiscal conservatives everywhere worried about being taxed out of your homes, I would be the clear choice, and I would appreciate everyone's vote. Texans for Zimmerman on Facebook. And thanks again.
I appreciate that. Eddie Rodriguez.
Thank you. Really, this is an election that's not about any of the candidates on this Zoom. It is about the people of Senate District 14 and who can get things done for those constituents. I'm not going to say that being in the House for 18 years is enough to qualify me automatically for this position. It is the fact that I've been able to get things done in those 18 years and working with my Republican colleagues, reaching across the aisle. I've been in the minority in the Texas House for 18 years, but still able to pass some significant legislation that I'm incredibly proud of. And I want to continue doing that in the Senate. In this moment, experience and the right experience is critical in this time of crisis. And I'm ready to hit the ground running. and ready to get things done for the people of Senate District 14.
Thank you, Eddie. Jeff Ridgeway.
Yes, thank you to the chamber for setting this up. As far as I can tell, this is probably going to be the only time that all 6 of us are interacting like this before the election. So I really appreciate that you guys have gone ahead and done this. You know, this is a unique election. If we have elections going back to November, you know, once the term is up, you're not going to see candidates like Pat and I on the ticket because the burdens are so high for independent candidates. We've heard a lot of good ideas today. We've heard a lot of good ideas from all sources here. But something I can tell you from experience, something's going to happen when these people get to the Pink Dome. They're going to get caught up in party politics and not going to really be addressing the needs of District 14. Really, the way forward, the way that we're going to look at addressing all of our needs effectively is by electing an independent candidate who's not from any of the major political parties. So thank you for your consideration.
Yes, thank you. Judge Sarah Eckhart.
State government needs to show up. The Senate needs to show up. We need governance. And although I've been proud to be part of a local team that governs and makes hard decisions, I am running for the Texas Senate because we need state government that works. So we've got some big challenges ahead of us, and it's going to take sustained attention and coalition building, not just in the Pink Dome. More importantly, coalition building outside the legislative session. With the real people of Senate District 14 looking for proactively going out and finding what is challenging us and what will get us over those challenges, and checking in with the people who actually know how things work on the ground and taking that coalition into the Senate. Kirk Watson was a beloved senator. He wasn't in the House before he was in the Senate. He was here with us, facing hard problems and coming up with difficult, ambitious solutions. And I want to be a 365-day senator for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Pat Dixon.
This is lots of fun, and I wish I could buy you all a beer. One day we'll have to all get together and do that, but I'm not referring to all 200 people that are dialing in. I'm fiscally responsible. But seriously, I appreciate everybody here. Go to my website, logic14.org. I can't address everything with 1-minute answers, so please go there and feel free to contact me. And when you do, ask yourself, is it time for some diversity in the Senate? Out of 31 members, shouldn't we have 1 libertarian? And Jeff's an independent too. So consider that, consider some diversity in the Senate. I want to be the logical choice for you. I'm Pat Dixon, logic14.org.
I appreciate that. Last but not least, Waller Burns.
I am so sick and tired of hearing on the other side of the aisle. I've never been in the Texas chamber. I'm not too sure that is there, but an aisle is to walk up and down on. Now, it doesn't make any difference what party you're a member of, Libertarian, Republican, Democrat, Independent. There is a way to simply say the heck with that other side of the aisle. Use common sense. My first vote for a president was JFK because I watched the first debates between he and Nixon. Nixon was horrible. My other Democratic vote was for Ann Richards, of course. Go with what is logical and what needs to be done and where it needs to be done. To heck with parties. I consider myself Republican because I'm a conservative, but I always vote for the person I think can do the very best job. Thank you.
I appreciate it so much. I want to thank each of our candidates so much for the lively discussion today. I also just appreciate your adherence to the rules of engagement. That's really important. We appreciate you for your time. We thank each of everyone who's tuning in, to the audience, for taking time to listen in. I want to give special thanks to the Chamber because I think it's very important to give voice to our candidates, and they did that. And we appreciate the Chamber defining such excellent questions questions to allow our candidates to provide their point of view. I understand it was a lot to cover and you only had 1 minute to do so, but I thought you did an excellent job and helped us get a slice of your perspective, and so that's greatly appreciated. I want to give special thanks to the partner chambers. So the Austin Young Chamber, the Greater Austin Asian Chamber, the Greater Austin Black Chamber, the Greater Austin Hispanic Chamber, and the LGBT Chamber. All of you partnered together with the Austin Chamber of Commerce, and we appreciate you doing that to help make sure that we got this information out to all of those who are tuning in today. Again, we did record this forum and it will be posted on the website, so please spread the word so that you can have others tune in and understand the voice and the perspectives of our candidates today. Please don't forget that early voting begins on Monday. That's this Monday, June 29th. Election Day is Tuesday, July 14th. Please make sure you exercise your right to vote. I think that is so important. For your information, please visit votetexas.gov. On July 15th, we will have a Pulse on Policy webinar to talk about the economic impact of diversity, and we will host our mid-year economic update on July 21st. And last but not least, as we open up businesses, we remember that while we're all different, there is an us in Austin, and you can see my background. And a mask on each of us is a win for all of us. And I definitely reiterate those points. I thank the Chamber and its partnership with all of the entities around Austin to recognize that we are all in this together. So please remember to wear your mask in public and protect yourself and your neighbors. Again, we thank everyone for tuning in. We appreciate your support. I thank all of our candidates again for their providing their perspective on the questions that we offered today. It is much appreciated, and I look forward to everybody tuning in for the next policy webinar and also going out to vote. So thanks again to everybody.